My name is Eric Colleary, and I'm the Klein Curator of Theater and Performing Arts here at the Harry Ransom Center at the University of Texas at Austin. I'm so grateful to you all for joining us today as we take an early look at our efforts to document the experiences of theater professionals and organizations from around the world. I especially want to thank my colleagues Lisa Pulsifer, Doug Newell, and Randy Ragsdale for making this program possible today. There's lots of things that we're going to cover. I'm really hoping to be able to share some of the highlights of the materials that have been submitted to the project so far, to be able to talk with you a little bit about how we're collecting and how we're preserving this material, and also some of the early insights of where the health and state of theater is right now. I'm going to have a brief presentation too. So let me just share my screen here. Let's see. It's also got sound, so I want to make sure I can do that. There we go. Excellent. So as we get started here, let's see. There we go. Fabulous. So questions. If you have questions at any point in today's program, I want to really encourage you to, if you're watching live, to put them in the discussion window, whether you're watching on YouTube or on Facebook. My colleagues are monitoring that conversation. Submit your comments, questions, any sort of feedback that you have. It'd be really welcome, and we really appreciate it. If you're watching this as a recorded program, you can still send questions and comments to our email address, performingarts@hrc.utexas.edu. So a little bit of background on this project. This is something brand new that the Ransom Center has been working on for over a year now, and we're really excited to be able to share it with you. Last March, when the pandemic really hit globally and was recognized as a global pandemic, theaters around the world began to shut down, and it happened very quickly. And it happened without a whole lot of advance notice. So in the sense that Broadway has actually really never shut down at this level before, the West End has never really shut down this level before. And to see it happening regionally, to see it happening in so many different communities, it really is unprecedented. And after this happened, I heard from so many different artists about what other instances in theater history we can look to where this might have happened before. So in earlier pandemics, earlier plagues, moments when the theaters closed, did performances move outdoors? What did people do for money? How long did they stay closed for? Was there any sort of government aid? How long did it take to recover? Was there anything changed by these pandemics? And those were really important questions that got me thinking about how we've documented previous moments of crisis within the theater profession and the theater history. So looking at things like the plague outbreak in 1665 in England, the big flu pandemic outbreak around 1918, 1919, these were moments when the theaters did close on a large scale, and there are many different documents that help us to understand what happened in those moments. We can see that even within the Ransom Center's own archives. There's production photographs for shows that did stay open. There's letters and correspondence. For example, this one here to Harry Houdini from the producer Daniel Frohman, who is thanking Houdini for performing and a benefit for actors as part of the Actors Fund. This was in January of 1919, shortly after the outbreak of the flu pandemic in October of the previous year. On the right of your screen, you can see an advertisement, a full-page advertisement that Edward F. Albee, the vaudeville impresario, took out in Variety newspaper, where he's really advocating for a new fund to be established to help theater professionals weather events like this. At the time in 1918, when things shut down, everybody was stuck in different cities, wherever they were on tour. And there was a lot of touring happening, particularly in the United States. And they were being advised not to go anywhere, to not move on to the next city, but to stay put, wait until they get further instructions. And people were out of work for weeks, at least in that early period of the outbreak. And there was a recognition even then that there needed to be some sort of support network for artists, many of whom, even to this day, are still working as independent contractors. So when the theater shut down, they have some sort of support network, whether it's health insurance, unemployment benefits, something, so that they can continue to survive. These incidences like the Spanish flu pandemic in 1918, this brought people together and led to communication in a way that really hadn't happened before. So there had been unions like Actors Equity, the International Stage Hands Union, IATSE, the International Alliance for Theater Stage Employees, stage designers unions. These organizations had been established already, but for the first time, in many ways, because of the flu pandemic, they started working together and advocating for stronger rights and protections for people who work within the theater industry. And so it's not unconnected from the flu pandemic that in 1919, there was the first major unified union strike amongst theater workers that really brought out significant changes within the profession. So these moments of crises become really important moments of change within the industry. So what about now? That was the big question, is so thinking about what was saved in previous moments of crises like that, what happens when we look at the current crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic that really closed globally so many theaters in March of 2020? So much of what's happening right now, as you can imagine, is digital. So conversations are happening online, press releases are going out. And so we have to be collecting this material in a different way than we collected in previous years. So with that in mind, the Ransom Center, we collectively agreed that this would be an important moment, that we really needed to reach out to people in the profession and start collecting material about this particular moment. If you're unfamiliar with the Ransom Center, we are a museum, a library, and an archive based at the University of Texas at Austin. It is a collection of vast scope within the performing arts alone. The collections span from the 11th century all the way to the present. We have an international array of collections, one of the best collections of American and British playwrights, ranging from Tennessee Williams and Arthur Miller to Tom Stoppard and David Hare, Adrienne Kennedy, Lillian Hellman, amazing writers that really document process and different moments in history. So we're in a really good position to be collecting this at an international level. But the process of collecting digital material from so many different people and really creating an open invitation poses some challenges that we had to take some time to work through. So even though we were beginning to think through these questions as early as March of last year, it took till sometime later to really figure out how this was going to work. The Ransom Center makes these collections available in many different ways too, I should say, not only in our reading room on site, where people come from all over the world to make use of them for research purposes or for artistic practice, but also through exhibits and programming here on site in Austin, Texas, but also all over the world through loans and through virtual programs like this. So in October of 2020, we launched the Theater 2020 collection once we'd figured out how exactly we were going to collect this material. So we created a dedicated page on our website, and we started sending out invitations and press releases to get the word out to the theater community that we wanted to share their stories, that we wanted to preserve them for posterity and to really document their experiences of the past year. So we ask people to sign in to register through the Ransom Center's website, and then they receive an upload link through box.com, a unique link specific to them, where they can submit whatever files they want to include in the Theater 2020 collection. It's as easy as dragging and dropping. We try to make it as simple as possible. And it's really been a remarkable experience. There really isn't a limit to what people can send in terms of file size. We are really hoping that we continue to get a robust response to this. The more material and the more diverse material we get, the better reflected experiences we have of how this moment has changed theater as a profession. So people can upload as many files as they want through this link. They can continue adding them as long as we're in this collecting phase, which will continue on at least until the theaters open and stay open with some sense of stability, and even probably a little bit longer, just to be able to reflect back on the current moment. And then all of those files get backed up onto the servers here at the university and elsewhere, so that they are protected for many, many years to come. And I want to give a big shout out to my colleague, Brenna Edwards, who's the head of digital archives here at the Ransom Center, whose job it is to look at all of our digital collections, digital archives, and make sure that they can stay accessible. And if you think about it, this is one of the real challenges to archiving in the digital age. There are WordPerfect files that are created in the early 1990s that you have to be able to change the formats or maintain software to continue to be able to access that information over a period of time. Data also gets corrupted. And so people like Brenna, who is absolutely amazing, she is monitoring all of these collections to make sure that that they're not being corrupted, that the file types are accessible, and that they're backed up and preserved so that people can come in and access them in the reading room. And I'll talk a little bit later about how that'll work. But I want to share with you some of the highlights of what we've been getting in the collection so far. And there's been a real range of material that I'm really excited about. So just to give you a sense of some of these things, we have playwrights like Diana Burbano, who had sent in emails about canceled productions early on in the pandemic. We have, I love this. This is Brian James Pollock, who runs a podcast through American Theater Magazine called The Subtext. I'm going to try to play this for you, but I'm realizing that my audio might be a little bit set up strange to play this. So bear with me as I figure this out. But what I'd like to play for you is a podcast that he created, just a snippet of it from March 2020, shortly after the theaters closed. Brian James Pollock had set up a phone number where people could call in, playwrights in particular, and say, this is my experience, basically. Leave a message describing their experience right now, what they're thinking about, what they're writing about, if they're writing at all, what their hopes and concerns are. And it's an incredible moment and an incredible archive that really captures the sort of emotional response that people were having immediately after the pandemic started. So I'm going to try to play this, and it should only just be a minute or so.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Rumberger. I'm a playwright in Chicago. I'm honestly really nervous about what is to come with theater. And, you know, I feel like I've spent like 10 years just working so hard to get all of these things, you know, like opportunities and like all sorts of like getting conferences and all that sort of stuff, and to kind of slowly work my way up to be a working playwright. And I'm really nervous and sad that those doors might not be there when this is over. And I think that the scariest thing is just like not knowing, just really having no idea what the world's going to look like, and is all the work going to be kind of worth, you know, is it all going to disappear? Yeah, so that makes me scared and sad. And I think the way I've kind of been comforting myself is to look at, like, read books and do all the things that that remind me how much I love words and how much I love stories. And I don't know, I'm not really reading plays right now because it kind of makes me sad. But, you know, that's pessimistic. I think we'll find a way to tell stories. I think, you know, things may change entirely, and who knows what it will look like. The rewards may be different, and we may be in a place where kind of art gets to be something that's rewarding in itself, which is maybe good. Yeah, so I am planning on writing new plays while I'm sort of on lockdown, just because I'm like, I thought about, should I try and write books? Should I try and write, other things? And I'm like, I love theater. Writing plays makes me happy, just the act of writing them. So I'm just like going to do that. And hopefully I'll be able to take comfort in that. And hopefully, we'll all get through this together. Thanks for asking. And yeah, hope all turns out well for everybody.
I love that. I think it's a very powerful moment and a very powerful recording of what this particular moment is like, and how people were experiencing it. And so that podcast in its entirety is part of the collection, along with several others pieces that Brian wrote during this pandemic as well. And so it's a wonderful snapshot. Brian actually went back and invited people to call again almost a year later. And those recordings are fantastic. I should mention too that anything I'm sharing with you right now, many of these things are also available online. They'll be part of the collection for posterity. But if you're interested, I really do encourage you to do a Google search. You can find the subtext online and dig in. Diana Bourbano has a website as well, so you can learn more about her work. So do explore the work of these incredible artists who are participating in this project. Other projects, other things that are coming into the collection. Nina Dunn in London, amazing project that she started called the Dark Theaters Project. Nina is a video video designer based in London. And when the theaters closed, she reached out to colleagues in the theater profession in the West End and asked them if she could go into the abandoned theaters and take photographs while they were closed. This was just after the pandemic, and still a sort of feeling that, not knowing really when these theaters would reopen. But what happened was that she was able to create an incredible digital archive, this incredible photographic archive of what these theaters look like. And so you see not only the empty theaters, but you see the scripts that have been left out and abandoned. You see the dressing rooms that are there and ready, waiting with the actors' makeup kits and their personal effects still laid out on the tables as if they're coming back immediately. Even the props on the prop table are all laid out, and they're striking, really remarkable photographs. And she has assembled these together into a book that's available through her website. You can Google the Dark Theaters Project. And the book, and as well as other materials like safety curtain masks and other things are being sold through the website as a way of raising money for theater professionals who've been impacted by COVID-19 and the theater closure. So an incredible project, and the physical copy of the book, the digital manuscript, and many of the photographs have been included as part of the program. The Court Theater in Chicago has been really remarkable in responding to this project, and I'm so grateful to them and to Gabby, who has gotten a grant through the court to help document the theater's experiences during this period and to share those files with the Ransom Center's Theater 2020 project. They have been doing an incredible range of programming during this time. And one of the sort of very simple but very powerful projects and programs that they've offered through their website is something called the Liminal Space, where they left the ghost light out on the stage and set up a live stream camera to broadcast it out to the world 24 hours a day for almost a year. It's an incredible thing. The ghost light is left on. If you work in theater, you know that it's on the stage when the theater is empty, to ensure, for one thing, very practically, that nobody falls off the stage, that people can see where they're going when all the other lights are turned off. And in this period, the ghost light is taken on a different meaning of hopefulness and anticipation for that day when the theaters will reopen again. And so having this broadcast out into the world is an incredible record, again, of this particular moment. Some theaters have also been tragically sending in information about their theaters deciding to close down. That in some cases, in the case, for example, of Mercury Theater in Chicago, that that the situation is such that they can't financially support themselves and can't keep the doors open, and they'll have to close permanently. And so in this case, Mercury Theater has shared several press releases and newspaper clippings about the theater's closure and this decision at this time. Organizations too, support organizations like the Theatres Trust in the UK. It's an incredible organization that for many, many years now has been working to protect historic theaters across the country. The Theatres Trust has taken a very special role during the pandemic because these theaters, which in some cases are several hundred years old, are closed currently, and there may not be staff there to see, for example, if a water pipe bursts or if the roof is leaking. And so they've been really advocating for protection and for constant vigilance with these spaces. They've also been aware that so many theater managers during this time of closure have used this opportunity where there really aren't productions, there really aren't audiences, to do some much needed renovation work. And so they've worked a lot with theater managers to make sure that they're doing this to code, that there are resources available to them, and that they're maintaining the integrity and the historic nature of these buildings. And so they've shared a number of press releases. They've shared a lot of their documentation related to lobbying and advocacy within Parliament. And I'm just deeply grateful for the work that they've been able to do during this time, and so grateful to them for sharing it. Theater companies like Hijinks, which is an incredible theater company based in the UK that works with people who have learning disabilities or on the autism spectrum, they show that theater isn't just a place where people come and see shows, but they're community spaces as well. And they're places where people come and connect, where they learn, where they can socialize. And so they have shared a number of different videos and projects that they've done during the pandemic that have really highlighted how they've been able to use technology like Zoom to maintain not just performances and programs for the public, but also to maintain that sense of connection to each other. And that's something that is also really important to keep in mind. It's not just about ticket sales, it's about connection and it's about community. And when we lose the access to these theater spaces, it's really important that we figure out other ways to be able to stay connected. I'm also really, I love this video that I'm going to show you from Guildford Shakespeare in the UK. They did a production last summer of The Wind in the Willows, and they created a small video clip where they showed how they used very basic Zoom technologies to tell the story of The Wind in the Willows. And it's a wonderful sort of look inside how theater has used technology and pivoted in really quick and uncertain ways. So I'm going to play this for you now.
Look, this is The Wind in the Willows for Guildford Shakespeare Company.
Have a good one, everyone.
Now, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, your task is a serious one.
So sorry I'm late, my lord, but I had a sudden craving for pickled herrings.
So exciting. It's just like doing the real thing.
Oh, the world seems out on the river today. Having such a rumpus everywhere.
If I could just have a moment to explain, Your Honour. Oh, Toadie, I'm so glad to see you.
What happened?
I love it. It's so great. You see the quick costume changes, the green screen technology. So you can use a platform like Zoom, for example, that's meant for video conferencing, but use that technology and really figure out creative ways to be able to present performances. And this has been a recurring theme throughout this project, is that seeing how theater artists have used their creative skills to really learn new things, videography, editing, green screen technologies, these things that are otherwise maybe they had never encountered before the pandemic, but really figured out fairly quickly and began offering programs in some cases within less than a month after the theater closure last March. Others have been working on this kind of thing for some time, and I want to really highlight the work of Brendan Bradley, who has for many years been working within thinking through virtual performance, how technologies can engage new audiences through performance. And he created something called the Future Stages, which was an entirely 3D modeled performance arena where you could, as an audience member, enter into the theater through the lobby, get your tickets, get a program, and then enter the theater space, communicate with other audience members, and see a production. And it is a remarkable feat that he has made available through Creative Commons license for theater companies to be able to use, and try to make it as accessible as possible so that people, even if you don't have 3D modeling experience and virtual, extensive backgrounds in virtual technologies, you can make this work for your theater company. It is really remarkable. And so you can see, for example, that he's figured out how to have multiple actors in different locations geographically be able to zoom in or stream into a live performance and make it look like they are physically on stage together. Like I said, too, that as an audience member, you can come in, choose a seat, talk to the person sitting next to you, be aware of your surroundings. And it's a really remarkable experience. This is something, like I said, called Future Stages. But throughout the pandemic, Brendan has also been uploading incredible videos to YouTube to help theater professionals figure out all the different technologies that are available to them between Zoom and OBS broadcasting software to really use these technologies to help them and share really the complexity of what they can do. These videos and these instructional resources, the Future Stages project, all of that, Brendan has very generously included into the program and is definitely worth checking out. There's also submissions like this, which I really, really love. Marco Antonio Rodriguez, this is him. He's an actor based in New York. He sent in several photographs from his pandemic time. This is the studio that his closet that he turned into a voiceover studio to continue doing work at home during the pandemic period. A very frequently heard narrative about people who have been able to adapt, trying to adapt their spaces at home to be able to continue working. But then also photographs like this, during pandemic, I've gotten closer to my mother. It's very sweet and also very important that people's personal lives and their professional lives are integrated, that these spaces that are about connection and community, that's actually documented too. They're not exclusive from each other. And I'm very grateful to Marco and to others who have sent material like this for the collection. Christine Toy Johnson, who is an incredible actress and a playwright. We've been getting from a number of different playwrights and creators original works that were created during the pandemic period. This is a play called Empress Melee, Lotus Blossom, which was written first as a stage play, but adapted also as a Zoom play, where it deals with an actress who is auditioning for a role and comes across, unfortunately, some very frequently encountered racism within her audition experience, but does so also with comedy and in a way that really engages an audience in a meaningful way. And it's been fascinating to see how projects like this really are also not only speaking to the current social and political climate, but also to the technologies that are available to us to be able to create work like this. Adam Guan, who is a composer and songwriter based in New York. Adam had been approached by the American Theater Wing to create an opening number for the Tony Awards that was originally supposed to happen in June of last year. Adam responded by creating this amazing piece called We Got This, which was the sort of overall theme of the Tony Awards. You know, we are a creative bunch of people in theater. We can do this. We've got this. We've done Oklahoma in summer stock in a barn in the middle of a heat wave. We've got this. We can make this work. And then there was the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis in May of 2020. And people began to realize that maybe we don't got this. Maybe we need to take a moment, more than a moment, really, even as a nation, and figure out how we're going to respond and how we're going to support each other, and what needs to change, particularly in industries and fields like the theater profession. So that has been huge. And so the Tony Awards were postponed indefinitely. They're currently, I think, being scheduled now over a year later. But this song that Adam wrote is a sort of snapshot of this particular moment. And he's not only included the original audio recording draft of the song and the lyrics, but also a really thoughtful piece that he wrote specifically for this project, reflecting on that moment and the decision to hold off on the Tony Awards for a period. And it's a really powerful piece. With that, too, a number of theaters have been submitting their statements of solidarity with Black Lives Matter, their commitments to change, their responses to an organization called We See You White American Theater that's really been advocating for fundamental change to systemic racism within the field. And this is really important too, because this work is going to be ongoing. This isn't just something that a theater can do and be done with. This effort to change is going to take a very long time, and is a process that will take continued commitment and action. To be able to archive these statements is also part of the accountability of these theaters who are really committing themselves to that change, to make sure that they continue that work and that people will know whether they do it or not. So we're really honored to have theater companies like Detroit Public Theater who have submitted their statements for future researchers, for future scholars, for future advocates to understand how the theater has changed in this moment. There's also organizations like the Broadway Advocacy Coalition, an amazing organization that's been around for years and has been using theater as a tool for social justice and social change. They've done a lot of work with immigration, with education equity, and also around Black Lives Matter. They've held a number of workshops, especially during the pandemic and in response to Black Lives Matter, to really hold the industry, particularly the Broadway industry and the commercial theater sector, to hold them accountable for what's going on and to really be a space, to hold space to support each other. And I'm very grateful to Rob Nanis and the staff at the Broadway Advocacy Coalition for participating in the Theater 2020 project and preserving and archiving many of the recordings of these workshops and open spaces. It's an incredible record of this moment. There's so much that we're also not able to capture through documentation that just gets created on a day-to-day basis. So to try to respond to these things, we've been very active in trying to create oral history interviews. Really excited about this. We have gotten over a dozen of these recordings created so far since January. And starting next in 2 weeks on April 20th, the Ransom Center is going to begin releasing one of these oral history interviews every 2 weeks. So definitely keep in touch and stay connected to us on social media so that you can see these interviews as they come. We're really excited. The first of these recordings will be with the Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright and screenwriter Doug Wright, who is also president of the Dramatists Guild of America and has incredible things to say about the current state of American theater and about the important work that the Dramatists Guild has done to be able to support and protect the rights of playwrights at this particularly challenging time. Again, I just sort of alluded to these challenges to collecting, but just to highlight a few more of them, this work is particularly difficult because of the digital nature of so many of the conversations that are happening right now. Text messages are very difficult to be able to back up and archive. So we're trying to think through sort of strategies of how do you collect social media? How do you collect text messages? What happens when theaters haven't really centralized their documentation so that it's all in an accessible place? Remember, early on in this talk, I was saying how so many people in theater work on a contract basis. And so when they come in, a designer might, for example, come in, meet with staff, talk about the design project, figure out what they're going to do, design it, it gets constructed, it gets installed, there's opening night, and then there's the run. And oftentimes by the run, then the designer's work might be done and they're no longer there. They've moved on to other projects. If the theater company hasn't backed up and sort of figured out a way to include that material in the archive, then it could be lost or it could only be with the designer. So many people hold different parts of the collection. And so that's a real challenge, is just getting this material together. One of the things that theater historians have already reached out to us about is they've got questions about the financial health of the industry. What has been the economic impact on the theater community? What are people's budgets like? How stable are they to be able to reopen, even once the theaters are able to reopen? And so that's been a real challenge. Financial information is something that really a lot of theater companies have a tendency not to want to share, and theater producers have a tendency not to want to share that material very easily. And so it's hard sometimes to be able to get a good sense of the financial health right now of theaters. There's a sense potentially of embarrassment, a sense of privacy, and that's something we want to respect. At the same time, we also recognize that this is important information that future historians will want to know. So it's a careful balance that we're trying to figure out now. Also, when I reach out and I've been sending a lot of invitations to people to participate in the project, I oftentimes hear back from folks saying, it sounds like a great project, we'd love to participate, we just don't have the time or the staff to be able to really work on this. We try to make this as not labor intensive as possible, but at the same time, it does still take some time and some work. And we recognize that. And this is a particular time when a lot of theaters are either working on a bare bones staff or the staff aren't there at all. And there really aren't people there to be able to help do projects like this. There just isn't the bandwidth. So the big thing, I think, will be that we need to stay in touch and continue this project for a while to make sure that once staff are able to return, hopefully they will be able to return soon. And as bandwidth increases, that perhaps we can then come back to them again and ask them about their records. One of the good things about this project too is that in initiating a conversation with a theater company or an artist to say, well, what kinds of documentation do you have about this moment? In the cases where they don't have a formal archive or haven't been really collecting their institutional history or their own personal professional history, in some cases, these conversations are getting them to think about it for the first time. And if you are watching this as a theater artist or as someone who works for a theater company or an organization, and you have questions at all about doing that, I really encourage you to reach out. I'm always happy to help. I also want to highlight the work of organizations like the American Theater Archive Project, which again, you can Google, and there's incredible resources on their website to be able to support your work and to support your thinking through of how to organize and preserve your collection. So currently, as of April 6, 2021, as of today, we have about 166 registrants from predominantly the United States, the UK, Ireland, and Canada. We have over 916 files submitted, and over 500 direct invitations have gone out to artists and organizations around the world. This is again starting from about late October of 2020 to the present. It's not bad. It's a good response. It's an incredibly diverse response, which I'm really happy about. But we're still open, and we're still taking more registrations. We're still taking files, and I'd really encourage you, if you again are a theater artist or an organization, to consider submitting to the project. There's some really exciting things that we're learning so far. So just briefly before we wrap up and we move to our Q&A, I just want to highlight a few of those things that we're able to take away from this so far. There's many, many more. But one of the things, like I said, is that theater people are incredibly creative folks. They have been able to do extraordinary things in a very short period of time. They've become experts in streaming platforms and videography, at-home sound engineering, and producing in completely different environments. And it's going to be really interesting to look ahead once the theater buildings themselves reopen to see how virtual programming and sort of non-traditional programming that perhaps the theater organizations hadn't done before, to see how much of that sticks around and how video and streaming might impact performance in the future. The pandemic has been incredibly isolating for an art form that thrives on community and person-to-person interaction. It's been really tough, and that has been a consistent message from a lot of different artists and organizations. They miss audiences, that they consistently say that even when they do virtual performances, with some exceptions, it's been really hard to feel like you haven't been able to engage with audiences, that you're really not making those connections that really made those live performance special. There was, in the pre-pandemic moment, there was a lot of turnover in theater administration. So many long-serving artistic directors were beginning to step down, and new leadership was stepping in. So between the pandemic and ongoing conversations around racial equity, the makeup of administration and nonprofit boards is continuing to change in this moment, and there's a strong effort to hold theaters accountable for the promises made in response to Black Lives Matter and the violence against AAPI communities. And this is really key too. Like I said, this project is documenting not only the theater's statements, but it's also documenting the changes in board structures, the changes in artistic administration, and really highlighting, as these new theater announcements, season announcements are coming out for 2020, 2021, we're beginning to see actually, hopefully radically different programming being offered that is much more reflective of the diversity of our communities that we live in. We're also seeing that tough times bring people together, and they bring organizations together in a way that they weren't necessarily doing before the pandemic. It forces collaboration in an environment that would have otherwise been really difficult. We're seeing theater companies that, whether they're large or small, and if they have a tradition of working independently, we're seeing some of them pulling their resources and co-presenting works. And that's something really exciting that will hopefully also extend into the future. And also, one last thing that I would say is starting to come out of this material, and again, there's many more other things, but one big thing is that there are many people who work in the theater who work on freelance contracts, and many folks who receive healthcare only if they work on a certain number of productions per season. And that's the way that a lot of union managed healthcare contracts work. Many folks on permanent or seasonal contracts were furloughed or laid off too. And so unions have tried to step in and assist members through grants and financial assistance, but it hasn't always been enough. And this pandemic has really laid bare many of the major structural issues in the theater profession that really need to be addressed in the months and years ahead. This has got to change, and there needs to be a lot more support for not only the artists who were working on stage, but the artists who were working backstage, the administrators and professionals who were working within the house, within the office, and then all the support organizations that make theater run. There's so many people involved, and it's been an especially difficult time. This collection, like I said, there's going to be many other things, many other ideas, many other arguments, research, history that comes out of this collection. And it will be made available, all of it in its entirety will be made available through the Ransom Center's reading room on site here in Austin, Texas, and through the generosity of a number of people who have been participating in this project. They have generously granted copyright permission to allow us to put a good portion of the collection online as part of our digital collections portal. So at some point, hopefully within the next year, the Theater 2020 collection, a good chunk of it will be available online anywhere around the world without registration, without any fees. So stay tuned for that. You'll be hearing more from us about that as that day gets closer. But as I said too, we'll begin actually starting to share the oral history interviews as early as April 20th, and we'll be continuing to release them every 2 weeks. If you are a theater professional, if you want to learn more about this, if you'd like to register, there's the website. Again, we're really excited to continue this project, to grow it. The strengths are really, we can do as much as we can to try to promote it and to try to get people involved and to stay involved. But the strength of the collection is really based on the incredible contributions of its participants. And to everyone who has participated in the project and is watching this, whether live or recorded, thank you. Thank you so much again for your participation, for really helping to document this experience. That's what I have for the presentation part of it, but I want to shift and to invite, again, if you haven't shared questions yet or comments, please post those into the discussion window, whether you're watching live on Facebook or on YouTube. It'd be wonderful to hear from you. I'm going to stop sharing the presentation now. So just looking over some of the comments and questions, and thank you again to Randy and to Lisa, who have been keeping an eye on these things for me and have been sharing those questions. There is a question from Grant. I've been inspired recently by a streamed and brilliant production of The Belle of Amherst, which is a joint production of Actors Playhouse and Palm Beach Drama Works without audience. Really opened my eyes. So that's lovely. And these virtual programs are wonderful. If you had a particularly exciting virtual performance experience that you really enjoyed, consider reaching out to them and letting them know about the Ransom Center's Theater 2020 project. They might be able to share recordings. They might be able to share trailers, production material. People have been sending in rehearsal footage. There's some challenges in some cases because of rights, union rights in terms of recording and being able to share material like that. But the Ransom Center has a long history of being able to archive production recordings, and we take that very seriously. We try to make sure that it doesn't infringe on any copyrights or any labor or union issues. So thank you very much for that comment, Grant. There's a question from Amy Stengel on YouTube. Are you interested in the stories of how a public high school theater department responded to the events of 2020? Staying connected and creating. We are absolutely open to that. So this project is really, we're really focusing in on theater professionals. I definitely think that a high school drama teacher, a high school theater teacher is a theater professional. My drama teacher growing up certainly it was amazing. If I hadn't had that experience, I wouldn't have gone into theater. So please do think about sharing that. Those experiences really do make a big difference. We've got an incredible range of different organizations, from major regional theaters and commercial theaters on Broadway and the West End to small town community theaters and university theater programs who are participating. So absolutely, consider that. So those, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for those questions. Any other questions? Again, feel free to post those into the to the discussion window. A few things just to think about moving forward. This is, if you have the time to share this this information with friends, with people in the theater community, it really does make a big difference in being able to get the word out. As I said before, we'll continue to collect at least until theaters are able to consistently reopen, and probably for a period of time after that. And so we'd really appreciate the opportunity to be able to grow this collection as much as possible. There is a question from Lisa Cortez Walden on Facebook. Thank you, Lisa. She says, thank you so much. We've actually closed a nonprofit, but opened a for-profit production house that includes radio, multimedia, and publications. It's been very liberating. Of course, it changes our business model. Are you interested in this kind of information? Absolutely. That I think that is definitely a story that's coming out of the pandemic, is how financially people are responding. So people are, in some cases, shifting from a nonprofit model to a for-profit model. I think out of this, I've certainly heard from a number of different arts administrators and artistic directors that they're really thinking differently about their financial health and how they maintain the long-term health of their organization. So definitely, obviously, there is a huge dependency on box office and ticket sales. But are there grants that they can be applying for that they hadn't considered before? Are there endowments that they could be really building up so that there is some flexibility and some support, so that there is some consistent way to be able to keep the lights on and keep bills paid when if a situation like this comes up again, where a theater has to close for a period of time? We are certainly aware of the pandemic and very conscious of how the pandemic has closed theaters in a very global scale. But there are many cases on a yearly basis of how local and natural disasters, fires, floods, water pipe bursting, these kinds of things can sometimes shut down a theater company for some extended period of time. And so I think this has really forced a lot of people to think about emergency preparedness in a different way. It's not just about waiting for another global pandemic to be ready, but to think about what can you do to make sure that if your theater does have to close for a period of time, you are ready. So Lisa, thank you for that question. Absolutely, we'd be interested in thinking about those shifts and structural shifts in financial models for organizations, even if it means the organization has moved to other kinds of programming. Elon Lang on YouTube, thanks for watching, Elon. Have you gotten any materials that bridge from the theater into other parts of the performance world? I mean, like theater actors who branch out into commercials or film. Absolutely. And you'll see a lot of this in the oral history interviews that'll be releasing starting in 2 weeks. A lot of playwrights, even before the pandemic, had started getting work in streaming series in television and in film because there's this sort of recognition that playwrights are doing incredible work right now. We have it's an amazing period for the health of American drama, and British drama is actually really, really strong. And there's like really exciting writers working in that field. So a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot of people, there are people who have been able to support themselves during the pandemic, who otherwise would have been working in theater, but have been able to get jobs for streaming services, by doing commercial work, by doing voiceover work, podcasting, any number of different things, master classes, workshops being offered online that they'd never considered doing before. So really, the project, I think, is doing a good job of documenting the many different ways that people are financially supporting themselves during this period of time. Deborah Phillips says, so good to see you. Thank you so much for watching, Deborah. And to know that the Ransom Center is documenting this strange period in theater history. Let me know if there's any support I can get from London. Thank you so much, Deborah. I really appreciate it. And again, yes, please do help spread the word. Anybody that you know who might be interested in participating, it really helps to get the word out. So those seem to be the bulk of the questions. Again, if you're watching this later, after it's live, and you do still have questions, please feel free to reach out to us on our website, which you can get to at hrc.utexas.edu/theater2020. You'll see our contact information, the email address is there. You can set up a virtual meeting appointment with me to talk about your work, to talk about the Theater 2020 project, to talk about research and archives. I really want to welcome you to do that. The Ransom Center has been unfortunately closed to the public since March of last year. And we are really eager and excited to reopen and to welcome researchers and the general public back into the building. But till then, we're really excited to be able to meet with you through virtual programs like this. We hope that you'll stay connected. We hope that you'll stay tuned. Follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. Consider joining us in our membership program, which is really not just a great way to support the institution, but is actually really, it's a wonderful community and a wonderful way to stay connected. So thank you so much again for joining us this afternoon. And we look forward to seeing you hopefully again very soon.